question that changes everything. Here's something I need you to sit with for a moment. How many times have you stood at the edge of something that mattered? A business idea, a conversation you kept avoiding, a habit you swore you'd start on Monday, and felt that invisible wall go up. Not a wall made of circumstances, not a wall made of time or money or talent, a wall made entirely of you. You knew what to do. You had a plan. Maybe you even had a deadline. And still, nothing. If that sounds familiar, you're not broken. You're not lazy. And you're definitely not alone. Right now, across America, millions of people wake up every single morning with a list of things they know they should do and spend the entire day doing everything except those things. They scroll. They snack. They reorganize their desk. They tell themselves tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow rarely is. This isn't a motivational book. Motivation is the most oversold concept in self-help history. It's the cotton candy of personal development. Sweet for 30 seconds, gone before it matters, and never once built anything that lasts. What you're about to read is different. This is a blueprint for action. A psychological, neurological, and practical system for becoming someone who does things. Not when they feel ready, not when conditions are perfect, but right now, in the real world, with real resistance and real fear. What's destroying your potential isn't a lack of ambition. It's the gap between knowing and doing. And that gap has a name, a cause, and, most importantly, a cure. By the time you finish this book, you won't need to feel motivated to move. You won't need perfect conditions. You won't need someone to push you. You'll have built something far more powerful than motivation. A system wired into your daily life that makes action automatic, momentum unstoppable, and inaction feel genuinely uncomfortable. That's the transformation waiting on the other side of these pages. Let's begin. The paralysis epidemic. Why America stopped moving. We are living in the most knowledgeable, most connected, most opportunity-rich era in the history of human civilization. And yet, by almost every measurable indicator, people are more stuck than ever. Think about that for a second. You can launch a business from your kitchen table in Cincinnati. You can reach 1 billion people with a message from a studio apartment in Austin. You can learn almost any skill on earth for free right now from your phone. The barriers that stopped previous generations, geography, access, information, have been demolished. The playing field has never been more open. So why are anxiety rates at record highs? Why do more Americans than ever report feeling stuck in their careers, their relationships, their health, their lives? Why, with all this access and all this information, are so many brilliant people producing so little of what they're actually capable of? Because access without action is a prison. The modern world has engineered the perfect conditions for paralysis. We're drowning in options. We're chronically overstimulated. We've been conditioned by decades of instant entertainment to associate effort with discomfort and comfort with reward. Our ancient, survival-wired brains are being asked to navigate abstract long-term goals, delayed gratification, and complex decision trees that they were never designed to process at this speed or scale. The result? A society that consumes endlessly and creates almost nothing. A culture of planners who never build, of dreamers who never ship, of people who spend more time watching other people live extraordinary lives than building their own. And here's the cruelest part. Most people blame themselves. They call themselves lazy. They say they don't have what it takes. They watch someone else's success story and think the difference is talent or luck or some innate quality they were simply born without. That story is wrong. In believing it is costing you everything, The inability to take consistent action is not a character flaw. It's a predictable, understandable, solvable result of how your brain is wired, how your environment is designed, and how you've been taught to think about effort and discomfort. It's a systems problem, and systems problems have system solutions. Here's what the research actually shows. Action isn't a personality trait. It's not something you either have or you don't. It is a skill. It can be learned, developed, trained, and eventually automated. The people who seem like natural doers, the founders, the athletes, the artists who ship consistently and move fast, aren't operating on different hardware. They've built different software, different mental frameworks, different environmental setups, different relationships with discomfort. And every single one of those things is learnable. The cost of not learning them, though, is steep. Every day you spend knowing what to do but not doing it, you're not just losing time. You're actively training your brain to identify as someone who doesn't follow through. You're building an identity of inaction, one small avoidance at a time. An identity, as you'll see, is the most powerful force in human behavior. The paralysis epidemic is costing America its potential. It's keeping brilliant people small. It's letting fear disguised as waiting for the right moment rob families of financial freedom, communities of innovation, and individuals of the lives they're actually capable of living. But you picked up this book, and that means something. The crisis is real. The solution is real. And it starts here. The motivation myth. Stop waiting to feel ready. There is a lie at the center of almost every self-help message ever created. It's been sold to you in gym ads, career podcasts, Instagram captions, and $1,000 seminars. It's a lie so pervasive, so deeply embedded in the culture, that most people never question it. The lie is this: you need to feel motivated before you can take action. That single belief has killed more dreams, buried more potential, and wasted more years than almost any other idea in modern culture. And it's time to dismantle it completely. Motivation is an emotion. That's the first thing you need to understand. Just like joy, fear, and frustration, motivation rises and falls based on factors that are largely outside your control. Sleep quality, blood sugar, weather, what you saw on your phone 20 minutes ago. Basing your most important actions on motivation is like scheduling your entire financial life around how lucky you feel on a given Tuesday. Sometimes it works, but as a strategy, it's a disaster. Here's how the motivation trap plays out in real life. You get fired up about a goal, a new business, a fitness routine, a creative project. The excitement feels like rocket fuel, and for a few days you're unstoppable. Then the feeling fades, as feelings always do. When it does, something subtle but catastrophic happens. You interpret the drop in emotion as a signal. Maybe this wasn't the right goal. Maybe you don't have what it takes. Maybe it's just not your time yet. So you stop. You wait for the feeling to come back. Sometimes it does, and the cycle repeats. Most often it doesn't, and another year passes. This is the pattern that makes people feel like failures when the real problem is simply their relationship with motivation. The people who consistently build things, finish things, and ship things don't wait to feel motivated. They've made a different choice entirely. They've built systems. They've created habits. They've designed their lives so that action happens regardless of emotional state. Because they understand something most people don't. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. When you start before you feel ready. When you sit down at the keyboard when you'd rather do literally anything else. When you lace up your shoes at 6 a.m., even though your brain is screaming at you to stay in bed. Something neurological happens. Forward movement signals to your brain that the task is manageable. Momentum builds, and somewhere in the middle of doing the thing, the feeling you were waiting for to start the thing finally shows up. You don't find motivation by searching for it. You generate it through action. The motivational content industry, and it is a billion-dollar industry, has actually made this problem worse. Motivational videos, speakers, and books create a specific kind of emotional response that feels like preparation for action, but functions as a replacement for it. You watch a 20-minute speech about changing your life and feel like you've already done something. The emotional payoff comes without the work. This is the junk food of personal development, satisfying in the moment, empty in the long run, and quietly conditioning you to confuse consumption with progress. Real growth doesn't feel like watching a highlight reel. It feels like sitting with discomfort long enough to move through it. The alternative to motivation is commitment, specifically commitment to a system. When you operate from a system, the question isn't, do I feel like it today? The question is simply, is it time? Monday at 6 a.m. is workout time. That's it. No negotiation, no checking in with your feelings, no waiting for the stars to align. This approach, what psychologists call implementation intentions, removes the emotional weight from decision-making. You don't spend mental energy deciding whether to do the thing. The decision was made in advance. You simply execute. Think about the people in your life who seem most consistent. The ones who go to the gym whether it's sunny or raining. The ones who answer every email, ship every project, never seem to fall behind. Do you think they feel motivated every single day? They don't. They've just stopped requiring the feeling as a prerequisite. That shift, from feeling-dependent action to system-dependent action, is one of the most powerful transformations available to any human being. And it starts with accepting that you will never feel completely ready. Not once. Not for anything that matters. The most important actions of your life will happen in the absence of perfect conditions. They'll happen when you're tired, uncertain, afraid, and completely convinced that now is not the right time. The people who change their lives understand this and act anyway. Now it's your turn. Your brain is the enemy. And here's how to beat it. You are not weak. You are not undisciplined. You are not a uniquely flawed human being who lacks the capacity for follow-through. You are a person with a Stone Age brain trying to navigate a 21st century world. And that brain, brilliant as it is in many ways, is working actively, constantly, and with sophisticated precision to keep you exactly where you are. Understanding this isn't an excuse. It's a weapon. When you decide to take meaningful action toward a goal that genuinely matters, starting a company, writing a book, having a hard conversation, building a new discipline, your brain doesn't cheer you on. It sounds an alarm. Specifically, a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala processes the uncertainty of that new action and interprets it as potential danger. Your heart rate changes. Your thinking narrows. An invisible voice starts generating reasons why now isn't the right time, why you're not ready, why this particular idea might not work. This isn't self-sabotage in the dramatic sense. It's evolutionary programming. For most of human history, venturing beyond the familiar, trying new strategies, stepping into unknown territory, taking risks, could genuinely result in death. The people whose genetics shaped yours survived because they were cautious, because they defaulted to the known, because uncertainty triggered a threat response that made them stop and reconsider. That programming saved your ancestors' lives. Today, it's sabotaging your career. The prefrontal cortex, the rational, forward-thinking part of your brain, can override these survival responses. but it requires enormous metabolic energy to do so. This is why doing the important thing, the scary thing, the new thing, feels so draining at first. You're not imagining it. You are literally engaged in an internal battle against millions of years of evolutionary momentum. Most people experience this resistance and conclude they're doing something wrong. They interpret the discomfort as a red light. They wait for it to pass, for the path to feel clearer, for the anxiety to subside. Here's what high performers understand that others don't. Resistance isn't a stop sign. It's a green one. The presence of meaningful resistance is one of the most reliable indicators that you're moving towards something important. The bigger the goal, the bigger the brain's objection. This is a feature, not a bug, once you know how to read it. So how do you override the system? First, through the 2-minute method. When your brain is treating a task as a threat, commit to engaging with it for just 2 minutes. 2 minutes feels safe to the amygdala. It's too short to generate catastrophic failure. Once you begin, the brain's state shifts from resistance to engagement. Momentum replaces hesitation. And what was impossible 5 minutes ago becomes natural. This isn't a productivity trick. It's neuroscience. Beginning physically alters your brain's relationship to the task. Second, through environmental design. Your brain responds more powerfully to environmental cues than to conscious decisions. Want to write every morning? Put your laptop open on your desk the night before. Document already pulled up. Cursor blinking. When you wake up and see it, your brain doesn't process it as a new decision. It processes it as a continuation of established behavior. The environment has done the heavy lifting before your conscious mind even engaged. Third, through implementation intentions. Research by psychologist Peter Galwitzer shows that people who form specific if-then plans. If it's 7 a.m. on a weekday, then I will immediately sit down and write for 30 minutes, are dramatically more likely to follow through than people who make general intentions. This specific structure bypasses the decision-making layer, where resistance typically ambushes you. The response becomes automatic rather than deliberate. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, through reframing the feeling of resistance itself. Most people experience anxiety, hesitation, or discomfort before meaningful action, and interpret those feelings as evidence they shouldn't proceed. The reframe is simple but profound. That discomfort is your nervous system, recognizing that you're doing something that matters. It's not a warning. It's a signal. Welcome it. Name it. Then move anyway. The goal is never to eliminate neural resistance. You won't. It doesn't work that way. The goal is to build enough tolerance for it that it no longer has veto power over your behavior. Elite athletes feel pre-competition anxiety before every major event. High-level executives feel fear before bold decisions. The best authors feel doubt before every first draft. What separates them isn't the absence of these feelings. It's the decision, made years ago and practiced thousands of times, to act while feeling them. Your brain will catch up. The resistance gets quieter with each repetition. The neural pathways of action grow stronger every time you choose momentum over comfort. But only if you start. Identity rewired, becoming the person who gets things done. Here is a question most people never think to ask. Who do you believe you are? Not who you want to be, not who you're working toward becoming. Who do you, at your deepest level, actually believe you are right now? Because that answer, that story running silently in the background of every decision, is the most powerful force in your life. More powerful than your goals. More powerful than your plans. More powerful than your motivation on even your best days. Your identity is your operating system. And until you upgrade it, no app you install will work the way you need it to. Here's how it operates. Your brain constantly filters potential actions through a single, unconscious question. Is this something a person like me would do? If the answer is yes, the action feels natural and accessible. If the answer is no, your brain generates friction, excuses, and elaborate rationalizations for why now isn't the right time. This is why people can want to change and still find themselves unable to follow through consistently. Their behavior is perfectly aligned with their identity. They've just built an identity that doesn't serve them. Consider a real example. Two people are both trying to cut alcohol out of their lives. The first says, "I'm trying not to drink." The second says, "I don't drink." When someone offers both of them a drink at a party, the difference in outcome is stark. The first person needs willpower. They have to actively override the desire because drinking is still part of who they are. The second person experiences no significant internal conflict because the offer contradicts their self-concept. Same situation, completely different experience. Identity, not discipline, is the deciding factor. This principle scales to everything. If you believe you're someone who procrastinates, you will find ways to procrastinate even when the path of least resistance would be to simply do the work. Your brain will manufacture reasons to delay because delay is consistent with your story. If you believe you're someone who struggles with follow-through, finishing projects will feel unnatural, not because you lack the ability, but because completion contradicts your self-concept. The good news, and this is genuinely transformative news, is that identity isn't fixed. It's not a personality trait handed to you at birth. It's a story. And stories can be rewritten. The mechanism for rewriting it is simpler than most people expect. Evidence. Every action you take is a vote cast for a particular version of yourself. Vote enough times in the same direction, and your brain updates the story. Not because you declared it, or visualized it, or wrote it on a sticky note, but because the behavioral evidence became impossible to ignore. Start small, deliberately. If you want to become someone who follows through, find small commitments you can keep with complete reliability. Make your bed every morning. Arrive 5 minutes early. When you say you'll send something by Thursday, send it Wednesday. These actions seem trivial in isolation. In aggregate, they are transformative because they build a body of evidence that tells your brain, this is who I am now. Language matters here more than most people realize. There is a measurable neurological difference between saying, I'm trying to exercise more, and saying, I'm someone who trains every day. The first frames the behavior as effortful and uncertain. The second encodes it as identity. Your brain responds to linguistic cues and shapes behavior accordingly. Speaking the identity before it's fully real isn't lying. It's directing the evidence accumulation process. Social environment is equally powerful. Humans are among the most socially calibrating creatures on Earth. We unconsciously adjust our behavior to match the people around us. If you consistently spend time with people for whom ambitious action is normal, people who ship, who build, who finish things, your brain gradually updates what it considers normal behavior. The ceiling on your own expectations rises without you having to force it. This is why community is not a nice-to-have in personal development. It's a mechanism. Choose your environment carefully, because it is quietly choosing who you become. The ultimate goal is what psychologists call an action-oriented identity. A self-concept in which moving forward, solving problems, and taking initiative feel not like disciplines you maintain, but like expressions of who you naturally are. When you reach that point, Action stops being something you do. It becomes something you are. Building the machine, systems that make action. Inevitable willpower is a resource, and like every resource, it runs out. This is not a metaphor. Roy Baumeister's landmark research on ego depletion demonstrated that self-control draws from a limited cognitive reservoir. Every decision you make throughout the day, what to eat, whether to check your phone, how to respond to a difficult email, depletes that reservoir. By the time you sit down to work on the thing that actually matters, you're running on fumes, not because you're weak, because you're human. This is why relying on willpower as your primary strategy for taking action is a structural mistake. You're building a house on sand. The solution isn't to strengthen your willpower. It's to design systems that make willpower irrelevant. The most consistently high-performing people in business, athletics, and creative fields share a common trait that has nothing to do with extraordinary self-control. They've engineered their environments, schedules, and behaviors so that the right actions happen automatically. Decision fatigue never enters the equation because the decisions were made in advance, once, and never reconsidered. This is the architecture of inevitable action. Environmental design, the most underrated performance tool. Your environment is speaking to your brain constantly, issuing behavioral invitations and suggestions that you process mostly below the level of conscious awareness. The bag of chips on the counter, the TV remote on the couch arm, the phone on your desk, screen facing up. These aren't neutral objects. They're behavioral triggers, quietly steering your choices hundreds of times a day. The most powerful thing you can do for your productivity is to redesign your environment so that it pulls you toward what matters and pushes back against what doesn't. Want to exercise every morning? Lay your shoes, shorts, and shirt next to your bed the night before. Your groggy morning brain doesn't have to decide, prepare, or search. The environment has pre-decided. Want to write before checking social media? Put a physical notebook or open laptop directly in front of your coffee maker so you encounter it before you encounter your phone. Want to eat better? Don't fight willpower. Just don't stock the food you're trying to avoid. The grocery store decision is one. The kitchen decision is infinite. The friction principle is the operational core of environmental design. You naturally gravitate toward whatever is easiest. So, engineer your environment so that the easiest option is the one that serves your goals. Remove friction from desired behaviors. Add friction to undesired ones. Trigger-based systems. Piggybacking on what already works. Your brain is already running hundreds of automatic behavioral sequences every day. You don't decide to brush your teeth. You wake up, go to the bathroom, and it happens. You don't decide to reach for your coffee. Certain smells and morning cues trigger it automatically. Trigger-based systems, sometimes called habit stacking, work by anchoring new behaviors to these existing automatic sequences. After I pour my morning coffee, I will open my journal and write for 15 minutes. After I close my laptop at the end of the workday, I will spend 5 minutes reviewing tomorrow's priorities. After I sit down at my desk, I will immediately begin my most important task before checking any messages. The trigger carries the new behavior into your routine without requiring fresh motivation each time. The existing habit creates the momentum. The new behavior rides it. Minimum viable action. The cheat code for starting. The biggest barrier to consistent action is rarely the work itself. It's the activation energy required to begin. The task on your list feels enormous. The blank page feels confrontational. The project that needs an hour feels impossible when you have 20 minutes and a tired brain. Minimum viable action destroys this barrier by making the entry point so small that resistance can't find a foothold. Not write for an hour, write one paragraph. Not go to the gym for a full workout, put on your workout clothes. Not finish the entire proposal, open the document and write the first sentence. This is not about lowering your standards. It's about eliminating the gap between not doing and doing. Because here's what the research consistently shows. Starting is the hard part. Once you're in motion, momentum typically carries you far beyond your minimum commitment. The paragraph becomes a page. The workout clothes lead to a full session. The first sentence opens into an hour of focused work. Your only job is to start. The minimum viable action makes that possible every single day, regardless of energy, mood, or circumstances. Time-based systems versus goal-based systems. Most people structure their work around outcomes. I'll keep working until this is done. This approach has a critical flaw. It hands control to the task rather than to you. Projects expand to fill whatever time you allocate. Perfectionism finds infinite room. And you end your day uncertain whether you did enough, which erodes confidence and creates anxiety. Time-based systems flip this entirely. I will work on this project from 8 to 10 a.m. Full stop. The constraint creates focus. Parkinson's law, work expands to fill available time, becomes your ally rather than your enemy. And you finish your sessions with a concrete, measurable record of what you did. I worked for 2 hours. That's a win you can bank. Accountability architecture. When you're only accountable to yourself, self-negotiation is inevitable. You become simultaneously the demanding boss and the employee who explains why the deadline can't be met. The defense attorney almost always beats the prosecutor. External accountability breaks this dynamic. When someone else knows your commitment, a business partner, an accountability group, a coach, even a public announcement on social media, the social cost of not following through becomes real. Humans are powerfully motivated by social approval and the avoidance of social shame. Use this. It's not a weakness. It's a feature of your psychology that you can leverage strategically. The two-system approach. For complex long-term goals, a single system often isn't enough. High performers typically run 2 parallel systems. System 1 handles daily execution, the consistent actions that create forward momentum. Write every morning, train 5 days a week, make 3 prospecting calls each workday. System 2 handles strategic review, the periodic. Check-ins that ensure you're moving in the right direction. Sunday evening review of the week's progress. Monthly assessment of larger goals. Quarterly evaluation of direction and priorities. Together, these systems create both tactical consistency and strategic clarity, the combination that separates people who stay busy from people who actually build something. Failure protocols. The component. Everyone forgets. Every system, no matter how well designed, will eventually break down. You'll miss a day. You'll fall behind. You'll hit a stretch where life makes your routine impossible. Most people treat this as evidence the system doesn't work and abandon it entirely. This is the wrong response. What you need is a failure protocol, a predetermined plan for what happens when things fall apart. The rule might be, if I miss one day, I take my minimum viable action the next day without exception. If I miss 2 consecutive days, I schedule an immediate system review and adjustment. The key is that the response to failure is planned in advance, so it's automatic rather than emotional. Missing once doesn't break a habit. Deciding not to come back is what breaks it. Build your system. Design your environment. Define your minimum viable action. Stack your triggers. And know in advance exactly what you'll do when, not if, things go sideways. Consistency doesn't come from never failing. It comes from having a plan for failure that makes quitting harder than continuing. Procrastination is a lie. What's really stopping you? Let's kill the most comfortable story you've ever told yourself. You are not a procrastinator. Procrastination is not who you are. It is not a personality type, a genetic trait, or an unchangeable feature of your character. Procrastination is a symptom. And like every symptom, it has a root cause, one that most productivity systems never address, which is precisely why most productivity systems fail. The root cause is fear. Not the dramatic, heart-pounding fear of a physical threat. Something quieter and more insidious. The fear of what happens if you actually try and it doesn't work. Fear of judgment. Fear of failure. Fear of discovering that your best effort might not be good enough. Fear of the vulnerability that comes with putting something real into the world, where it can be evaluated, criticized, or rejected. Procrastination is your brain's most sophisticated protection mechanism. By never starting, by perpetually delaying, you never have to find out what the outcome would have been. You preserve the possibility of success without ever risking the reality of failure. This feels like safety. It is actually the most dangerous place you can live. The procrastination loop. Here's how it works in real time. You have a project that matters to you. Because it matters, there's pressure around it, stakes that activate your threat detection system. Your brain identifies the possibility of failure and generates resistance. A sudden need to check your email, an inexplicable interest in reorganizing your desk, an overwhelming conviction that you should probably research more before you begin. You follow the resistance. You choose the substitute activity, which provides immediate relief from the pressure. And here's the devastating part. That relief reinforces the avoidance. You've just trained your brain at a neurological level. That procrastination feels better than engagement. The next time you approach that project, the resistance will come faster, stronger, and with better excuses. You don't drift into chronic procrastination. You practice your way there, one avoided task at a time. The perfectionism trap. A significant portion of chronic procrastinators aren't actually avoiding work. They're avoiding imperfect work. They hold an impossibly high standard for output and find it preferable to never start than to produce something that falls short. This is perfectionism disguised as high standards. But here's the truth about perfectionism. It is not the pursuit of excellence. It is the avoidance of vulnerability, dressed up to look respectable. The perfectionist tells themselves they're waiting for the right conditions, the right inspiration, the right version of the idea. But what they're actually doing is protecting themselves from the experience of putting genuine effort into something and having it fall short of their internal standard. Perfectionism produces nothing. Progress requires imperfection. Every extraordinary piece of work that has ever existed started as a terrible first draft. Every successful business began as a rough, unpolished version of the eventual product. Every elite athlete was once a beginner who performed poorly and kept going anyway. The path to mastery runs directly through imperfection, not around it. Analysis. Paralysis research is procrastination. One of the most socially acceptable forms of procrastination is excessive research and planning. It looks like productivity. It feels like progress. And it functions as a perfect shield against the discomfort of actual action. I'll start as soon as I know enough. This sentence has buried more potential than almost any other. You will never know enough. The information horizon never arrives. At some point, you have to take what you know into the field and learn the rest through doing. The rule that breaks analysis paralysis. Good enough to start is better than perfect on paper. Gather the minimum information required to begin, then begin. Every additional day of research after that point is a day of not learning what the actual work would teach you. The 5-minute protocol. The most reliable weapon against procrastination is almost embarrassingly simple. When you're in avoidance mode, commit to working on the avoided task for exactly 5 minutes. Set a timer. Make it non-negotiable. 5 minutes is psychologically safe. It's too short to fail significantly. It's too short for the perfectionist to be threatened by. But it's long enough to do something the brain desperately resists. Start. And starting changes everything. Once you're 5 minutes in, the threat response subsides. The task reveals itself as manageable, usually far more manageable than your anxious brain was suggesting. The momentum of having started pulls you forward. The timer goes off and most people keep going because the barrier wasn't the work. The barrier was the beginning. The 5-minute protocol doesn't trick your brain. It bypasses the fear response long enough to demonstrate that the fear was disproportionate. Do it enough times and the fear begins to lose its authority. Implementation intentions. The most research-backed anti-procrastination tool. The research is striking. People who form specific if-then plans for their intended behaviors are dramatically more likely to follow through than people who make general commitments. I'm going to work on my business plan fails far more often than, if it's 7 a.m. on Tuesday, I will sit at my kitchen table with my coffee and work on section 2 of my business plan for 45 minutes. The specificity is the point. Vague intentions leave enormous room for negotiation, rationalization, and ultimately avoidance. Specific plans create automatic behavioral responses. Your brain doesn't have to decide. It just executes the if-then sequence that was already programmed. If you're struggling with procrastination on a specific task, don't just put it on your to-do list. Write the implementation intention. If time, place, cue, then I will specific action for a specific duration. Then honor it with the same reliability you'd give a commitment to someone you respect. Environmental manipulation. Making procrastination harder than action. What does your procrastination environment look like? For most people, every procrastination tool is one click away. Social media, streaming services, news, games, messages, while the tools for the work they're avoiding require navigation, loading time, setup. Flip the design. Website blockers during work hours. Phone in a different room. Entertainment apps removed from your home screen and replaced with the apps that connect you to your goals. Browser homepage set to your most important project document rather than a news feed. You're not eliminating temptation through willpower. You're engineering a space where willpower is rarely required because the path of least resistance leads toward your work. The Procrastination Emergency Protocol. When you catch yourself mid-avoidance, run this sequence immediately. Step 1. Name it without judgment. I'm procrastinating right now. Not, I'm so lazy or I can't do anything. Just a neutral observation. Step 2. Identify the underlying fear. What specifically are you afraid will happen if you engage with this task? Name it explicitly. Step 3. Commit to the smallest possible action. Open the file. Write one bullet point. Make one call. Just the very first move. Step 4. Focus exclusively on starting, not finishing. The finish line is not your concern right now. Beginning is your only job. The procrastination paradox, the cruelest part of this whole pattern, is that the tasks we avoid longest are almost always the ones that would change our lives the most. The business plan you haven't written. The difficult conversation you haven't had. The creative project that's been living in your head for 3 years. Fear protects you from those things most aggressively, precisely because they matter most. Overcoming procrastination isn't about productivity. It's about refusing to let fear make your most important decisions. The momentum engine, from first steps to unstoppable force. There is a moment, every person who has ever built something knows it, when the struggle changes. In the beginning, every step feels like pushing a boulder uphill. The writing feels forced. The workouts feel brutal. The calls feel uncomfortable. You're manufacturing every ounce of forward movement through sheer decision and discipline. And then, somewhere along the way, usually when you're not even looking for it, something shifts. The boulder starts moving on its own. This is momentum, and it is the most underestimated force in personal development. Newton's first law doesn't care whether you're describing billiard balls or human beings. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. The single hardest moment in any meaningful pursuit is not the middle, or the challenge, or the obstacle. It's the very beginning, when you're fighting against the full weight of your own inertia. Once you're moving, maintaining that movement requires a fraction of the energy that starting demanded. The critical question then is not how to sustain momentum. It's how to generate it in the first place, and how to protect it once you have it. Small actions, enormous power. Here's what most people get wrong about momentum. They think it comes from big, dramatic actions, grand gestures, massive efforts, all or nothing days where you work until midnight and move a mountain. It doesn't. Momentum is built by small actions performed with absolute consistency. A person who writes 300 words every single day generates more momentum and produces more work than a person who writes 3,000 words once a week. The frequency matters more than the magnitude. Daily action maintains the neurological pathways of execution. It reinforces identity. It creates evidence of who you are becoming. This is the counterintuitive truth. Doing less, more consistently, is more powerful than doing more, sporadically. The momentum equation. Sustainable momentum has three components that must work together. Frequency, how often you take action. Daily beats weekly. Weekly beats monthly. The more often you engage, the less re-entry resistance you encounter. Consistency, the reliability of your action regardless of mood, conditions, or competing demands. Consistency is the variable that compounds. Progression, the gradual increase in challenge or scope as your capacity grows. Without progression, consistency produces maintenance rather than growth. All three must be present. Frequency without consistency is sporadic. Consistency without progression is plateau. Progression without frequency is the occasional grand effort that changes nothing. The starting ritual. Momentum's on-ramp. One of the most powerful tools for momentum generation is a consistent starting ritual. A short, repeatable sequence of actions that signals to your brain that execution mode is beginning. For a writer, it might be, make coffee, clear the desk, open the document, write the date at the top of the page. The specific actions are less important than their consistency. Every time you run this sequence, your brain learns to associate it with focused work. Eventually, beginning the ritual is beginning the work. The mental transition happens during the preparation, rather than requiring separate effort. Professional athletes have elaborate pre-game rituals, not because they're superstitious, but because rituals are proven neurological momentum starters. They prime the brain for performance before the performance begins. Design your starting ritual and protect it fiercely. The minimum effective dose. Momentum insurance. Define the smallest action in your discipline that still counts. The minimum effective dose that maintains your streak, preserves your identity, and keeps the neural pathways warm even on your worst days. For writing, 1 sentence. For fitness, 1 set. For a creative project, 5 minutes of engagement. For a skill you're building, 1 small practice repetition. This isn't permission to always do the minimum. It's a guarantee that you never completely. This isn't permission to always do the minimum. It's a guarantee that you never completely stop. Because the momentum cost of missing 3 days is enormously higher than the investment cost of doing something minimal. The minimum effective dose ensures that even when life intervenes, travel, illness, crises, your momentum doesn't die. It idles. Momentum stacking. Borrowing from what already works, every existing strong habit in your life represents an active momentum stream. You don't build momentum from scratch for every new behavior. You attach new behaviors to existing streams. Already have a consistent morning routine? Stack a new learning habit onto the end of it. Already exercise regularly? Add mobility work to your cooldown? Already have a reliable weekly review? Extend it by 10 minutes to include strategic planning. This is momentum stacking, leveraging existing behavioral inertia to power new habits, rather than creating new starting points, which require new activation energy. You're piggybacking on pathways that are already warm. The streak psychology. Tracking consistency streaks has a specific psychological effect that goes beyond simple accountability. Once you've built a streak of meaningful length, 30 days, 60 days, 100 days of showing up, the streak itself becomes a motivating force. Breaking it carries a psychological cost that feels disproportionate to missing a single day. This is momentum protection through identity investment. You've accumulated behavioral evidence over months. That evidence now feels like something worth protecting. The streak has become part of who you are. Track your streaks visibly. A simple calendar with a daily X is more motivating than most elaborate tracking systems. The visual chain of marks creates a concrete record of who you're becoming. The momentum destroyer. You don't see. Coming. The most common killer of hard-earned momentum isn't external disruption. It's internal perfectionism. The moment you produce something that doesn't meet your internal standard, perfectionism urges you to stop. Wait until you can do it right. Don't continue at a lower level. This sounds like high standards. It functions as a complete momentum shutdown. The replacement principle. Imperfect action with course corrections always beats perfect inaction. Your work doesn't need to be great every day. It needs to happen every day. Quality is a byproduct of quantity pursued with reflection. The writers who produce extraordinary books have almost universally written enormous amounts of mediocre work that never saw publication. The momentum of production was what made the extraordinary possible. Protect your momentum from perfectionism. Move forward, adjust as you go, and trust the compound effect of consistent, imperfect action. The social momentum effect. The people you spend the most time with are not just influencing your values and habits through conversation. They're calibrating your brain's definition of normal. When consistent, ambitious action is the norm in your environment, when the people around you regularly ship things, build things, and follow through, your brain stops treating those behaviors as exceptional and starts treating them as baseline. You don't have to generate motivation for behaviors that feel socially normal. This is the most underrated lever in personal development. Community. Not as emotional support, though that matters too. As a normalization engine for the behaviors that create extraordinary results. Choose your environment with the same intentionality you choose your habits. The two are inseparable. The consistency code. Showing up when it's the last thing you want to do. Consistency is not glamorous. There's no viral moment for it, no highlight reel. Nobody posts a video of themselves doing their small, important daily action for the 416th consecutive time. Consistency doesn't make for compelling content. It makes for a compelling life. And those are very different things. The great achievers across every domain, business, athletics, creative work, science, leadership, are not primarily distinguished by their peak performances. They're distinguished by their floor, by what they do on the days when nothing is exciting, when no one is watching, when it would be completely understandable to take the day off. Their floor is higher than most people's ceiling. And that floor was built one unremarkable, unconditional day at a time. The perfectionism trap in consistency. The most common mistake people make when trying to build consistency is setting the bar for a successful day too high. They commit to an hour of writing, a full workout, 2 hours of deep work, and when life makes that impossible, they treat the day as a loss and take no action at all. This is the all-or-nothing thinking that destroys consistency more reliably than any external obstacle. It turns circumstances into excuses and makes every imperfect day a reason to stop, rather than an invitation to do less but still do something. True consistency is not uniformity. It is persistence, the willingness to keep showing up, even in diminished form, regardless of what the day brings. The consistent person doesn't always give 100%. On some days, they give 20%. But they give something every day, without exception. And that daily something compounds into something extraordinary over time. The minimum viable commitment. The engineering solution to this problem is defining your minimum viable commitment in advance, before the hard days arrive, before motivation is gone, before life makes your ideal routine impossible. Your minimum viable commitment is the smallest action you can honestly take that maintains your identity as someone who shows up for this. It should be so small that the only reason you wouldn't do it is because you actively chose not to. For writing, 50 words. For exercise, 10 minutes of any movement. For learning, 1 page of reading. For a business you're building, 1 meaningful action. The minimum viable commitment is not your daily goal. It is your daily floor. The guarantee beneath your ambition that ensures no day ever becomes a zero. Identity-based consistency. The most sustainable form of consistency isn't goal-driven, it's identity-driven. Goal-based consistency asks, did I move toward my outcome today? Identity-based consistency asks, did I act like the person I'm becoming? The difference is significant. When your consistency is tied to an outcome, a bad result can feel like it undermines the effort, and therefore the effort itself becomes questionable. When your consistency is tied to identity, a bad result is just information. The effort remains valid because the effort is who you are, not just a means to a specific end. I'm a writer doesn't need daily word count validation the way I'm trying to write a book does. I'm someone who trains isn't threatened by a slow workout the way I'm trying to lose 20 pounds is. The identity frame makes the behavior self-justifying. You do it because it's who you are, not only because of what it will eventually produce. Environmental consistency. Same place, same time. Your brain forms habit associations based on contextual cues, the time, place, and circumstances in which behaviors regularly occur. The more consistent these cues, the more automatic the behavior becomes. This is why working at the same desk at the same time, with the same pre-work ritual, dramatically reduces the energy required to begin. Your environment has become a behavioral trigger. The context cues the action before you've made a conscious decision about whether to take it. If your consistency is struggling, examine your environmental consistency first. Are you trying to write in different locations at different times? Is your workout scheduled at variable times depending on the day's circumstances? Inconsistent context means inconsistent automatic responses, which means you're relying on fresh motivation every single day. Lock in the when and the where before you work on the what. The recovery protocol. Every consistency streak will eventually break. Travel, illness, personal crises, professional disasters, life will disrupt your routine. This is not a question of if. It is only a question of when. The people who maintain long-term consistency are not the people who never miss. They're the people who have a protocol for what happens when they do. The rule: never miss twice in a row. Missing one day is an event. Missing 2 days in a row is the beginning of a pattern. Missing 3 is a new default. The second day response is everything. If you miss one day, the next day is non-negotiable. Not twice the output, just the normal minimum viable commitment. The streak resets, but the identity doesn't. You are still someone who shows up. Yesterday was an exception. Today is the resumption. Buffer habits. Consistency. Insurance. Buffer habits are pre-planned alternatives to your primary habit that maintain your identity on days when your primary habit is impossible. They ensure that you never have to choose between your preferred behavior and nothing. There's always a third option. If your primary habit is a 60-minute morning run and you wake up to a snowstorm, your buffer habit might be 30 minutes of indoor movement. If your primary is writing 1,000 words and you have 90 seconds, your buffer is writing 1 paragraph. The buffer habit isn't as good as the primary, but it's infinitely better than 0. And crucially, it maintains the identity. You remain someone who trains, who writes, who shows up, even when the full version isn't accessible. Seasonal consistency. Working with your biology. Humans have natural rhythms, energy fluctuations across days, weeks, and seasons that affect capacity without affecting commitment. Fighting these rhythms is exhausting. Working with them is intelligent. Seasonal consistency means adjusting the intensity and volume of your habits while maintaining their frequency and identity. In high-energy periods, push harder. In lower energy periods, pull back to the minimum viable commitment. Never stop, but don't maintain the same intensity regardless of your current capacity. The goal is not to maximize each individual session. The goal is to still be in the game in 5 years, to have compounded the effects of daily action over a time frame where the math becomes staggering. The compound effect. Why your small actions are bigger than you think. The compound effect is why consistency is worth defending with everything you have. Day 30 of writing looks almost identical to day 1. Day 100 starts to look different. Day 300 has changed something fundamental. By year 2 of daily action, the person doing the work is nearly unrecognizable from who they were at the start. Not because any single day was dramatic, but because the cumulative effect of never stopping is profound. Most people quit before day 100. They judge the compounding investment by day 30 returns and conclude it's not working. This is the critical mistake. The compound curve is almost flat for a long time, and then suddenly, based on accumulated foundation, it turns upward dramatically. Your consistency is an investment. The dividends are not paid daily. They're paid at intervals, in amounts that seem impossible when you're in the middle of the flat part of the curve. Stay in the game. Protect your floor. Trust the math. Your daily minimum, honored without exception, will do more for your life over the next 5 years than any single decision you will ever make. Breaking. Every obstacle. Obstacles are not signals to stop. They are tests of commitment and generators of capability. Every barrier you face, internal limiting beliefs, external resource constraints, relationship resistance, has a hierarchy. Level 1 obstacles yield to simple action. Level 2 requires strategy and sustained effort. Level 3 demands identity level change. The critical skill is distinguishing persistence, continuing with adapted strategies, from futility, repeating ineffective approaches. Your most powerful obstacle is always internal. The fear, conditioning, and comfort zone that follow you regardless of external circumstances. Entering acceleration. There comes a moment in every sustained effort when linear progress becomes exponential. This tipping point is not luck. It's the predictable result of accumulated momentum reaching a threshold. Skill stacks create unique competitive advantages. Relationship networks begin generating opportunities automatically. Systems begin running without constant manual input. Most people quit during the flat, linear phase, just before the curve turns upward. The acceleration phase rewards only those who stayed. The psychology of pressure. The right kind of pressure, what researchers call eustress, is a performance catalyst, not a threat. Self-imposed deadlines with real consequences. Public commitments that activate social motivation. Compressed timelines that eliminate perfectionism and force focus on essentials. Strategic pressure applied intelligently produces results that comfortable timelines never generate. The goal is not to live in chronic high stress. It is to use targeted, time-bounded pressure as a precision tool for acceleration. Social multiplication. No significant achievement in human history was truly individual. Accountability partners who match your ambition. Mastermind groups with diverse perspectives and mutual commitment. Peer environments that normalize ambitious action. Public commitments that make your reputation a stake in your follow-through. These social forces are not supplements to your effort. They are multipliers of it. The most reliable path to doubled output is not doubled effort. It's doubled accountability. Environment as destiny. Your environment is the silent author of most of your daily behaviors. Every element of your physical space, digital ecosystem, social circle, and information diet is either pushing you toward your goals or pulling you away from them. There is no neutral. Redesigning your environment is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing optimization process that must evolve as your goals evolve. When your environment and your goals are aligned, success stops feeling like an achievement and starts feeling like an inevitability. Building unbreakable resilience. Resilience is not the absence of being affected by setbacks. It is the ability to feel the impact fully and continue taking purposeful action despite it. Anti-fragility goes further, the capacity to emerge from stress stronger than before. Cognitive reframing, emotional regulation, stress inoculation, and rapid recovery protocols are the components of psychological toughness that sustains action through every season of challenge. The bigger your ambitions, the greater the adversity you will face. Build your capacity for adversity at the same rate you build your ambitions. The unstoppable identity. Every technique in this book, the systems, the environmental design, the accountability structures, the momentum protocols, ultimately serves one purpose: to help you build enough behavioral evidence that your identity updates, that the story you tell yourself shifts from "I'm someone who tries to take action" to "I'm someone who does." When that shift is complete, none of this feels like discipline anymore. It feels like expression. You don't force yourself to show up. You can't help but show up, because showing up is who you are. This is the destination. Not a destination where life is easy, where challenges disappear, where success comes without effort. A destination where your relationship to effort has changed so fundamentally that no challenge can stop you. No obstacle can permanently derail you, and no amount of initial resistance can prevent you from ultimately moving forward. You are not waiting to become this person. You already started becoming them the moment you decided to read this book. Now, go do the thing you've been putting off.